Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by First Federal Bank. It's Monday, April 25th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. Are you feeling the draft? Herbie Teope is. He's the Star's chief beat writer, and on Sunday he pumped out his fourth mock draft. It's going to be a busy draft day for the Chiefs, draft weekend. They go into Thursday with 2 selections in each of the first 4 rounds, and then 4 picks in the 7th for a total of 12. We'll see if they keep them all, trade up, or even trade down for more picks. On today's show, we break down the draft and explain why this year's 3-day event is as important as any in recent years for the Chiefs. Also, toward the end, we give our push comes to shove selections for the first round. Herbie and I actually agree on one of them. Okay, let's get started talking Chiefs draft. Herbie, it's draft week, and covering the NFL never ends, of course, but we reach an end to the draft by Sunday. Are you happy, sad? I mean, you spend so much time on the draft, so much time. You've got 4 mock drafts already in the books. Will you be a little relieved when all this is over?
I mean, not necessarily relieved. This is an exciting time of the year if you cover a team because you get to watch them add pieces to it. Here's the interesting thing. Okay, you mentioned 4 mock drafts with 12 draft picks. So 12 times 4 is 48 players. And I didn't even come close to half the players that Brett Veach and his staff have on their draft board. As of Friday, they had 194. But, the good news is, the draft typically ends what I call speculation season. Now we don't have to worry about the Chiefs could, should, would do certain things with picks or even free agents. Now we know because the finality of all from February until now, the speculation season of the NFL will be over because after the draft, now we dive right into watching the players back on the practice field. It happens that fast. So this is an exciting time of the year for a lot of people, including you, media members who cover the NFL. We look forward to the draft.
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I am looking forward to it because the Chiefs are front and center in this year's draft. They haven't been the last 2 years, but they are this time with the picks at 29 and 30 in the first round, and then 2 more in the second, 2 more in the third, and 2 more in the fourth. At least going into the draft, that's what they have, plus 4 in the 7th round. So 12 picks in the draft. I think the Jaguars have 12 as well, and those are the only 2 teams with that many in the draft this year. It's the first time since 2008. I looked this up. Chiefs had 12 picks in 2008. They went into that draft with 13, ended up draft day trade to move up. They ended up with 12 picks in 2008. That was the draft that produced Jamal Charles. So they did get 1 gem out of that draft. So here's what I wanted to ask you before we kind of dig deep into who might be going and what the Chiefs might do. This is it's kind of a tough speculation question, but what does a good draft look like in terms of percentage of hits, right? If let's just say it's a typical, 1 pick each round, 7-member draft. How many of those guys need to be starters? How many need to be stars? What does a good draft look like?
That's a very good question, Blair. You put me on the spot, but I think that's a very fair question. Most teams, here's the biggest difference. General managers need at least 3 to 4 years to grade their draft, which of course, we don't have that luxury because we're going to grade it immediately. But to properly evaluate a draft, you have to give them at least 2 to 3 years. Okay, because you need to figure out who's going to be the impact player, who's going to start, who's going to contribute immediately. And in order for the Chiefs to hit their picks, we know what their needs are. So we're going to react to based on what their needs are. And if they check those boxes, I'm going to think, hey, this is a good draft. I thought last year was a good draft. I gave him an A. When you found immediate starters in Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, players who contributed immediately. So I gave that draft an A before we saw what they were able to do in the regular season. So, back to your question, what makes a successful draft? The guys have to contribute immediately. And I think the Chiefs, with 12 picks and 5 in the first 100, as you mentioned there, they should be able to find blue chip players who should be able to come in and contribute immediately at those positions of need.
I think you're absolutely right on last year's draft. I mean, it was they ended up with 6 players, right? And none in the first round. It was they didn't have their first pick until second round, and Nick Bolton was their first pick in the second round. Creed Humphreys went 5 picks later in the second round, and those turned out to be excellent players. Creed Humphrey may have been the best center in the NFL last year. And you mentioned Trey Smith. What a find. Probably the steal of the draft at number 6. I absolutely right. You gave it an A at the time, and it kept that A, and it'll continue to be an A draft for the Chiefs. The year before that, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the first round pick, he went number 32 overall. This was the draft right after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. They also got Willie Gay with their second round pick, Lucas Niang as their third, and L'Jarius Sneed as their fourth. I cannot remember the grade you gave this draft, but looking back, it is a B+, A- draft as far as I'm concerned.
And I believe I gave it an A-.
Yeah. Look, I think we looked at the Clyde Edwards-Helaire draft with a little bit of pick with a little bit of head shoulder shrug. Did they really need that? But look, he's been a starter, and Willie Gay certainly a starter for a couple years, and Lucas Niang would have been a starter for all 16 games last year if he hadn't gotten hurt. And L'Jarius Sneed has been terrific. So and Michael Dana came out of that draft as well. Bo P. Keys is the only one that did not produce for the Chiefs. So 6 players taken, and I think 5 hits in that draft. The year before that, McCole Hardman, Juan Thornhill, Colin Saunders, Rashad Fenton came out of that draft, Nick Allegretti, Darwin Thompson. So, any of these players that we've mentioned, all pros, not yet, or Pro Bowlers, not yet. But I think all 3 of those drafts, the 21, 20, and 19 drafts, I think were all successful for the Chiefs in producing starters. And if you get an all-pro, I would say Pro Bowler, not all-pro, in a draft, that's acceptable. I think you should expect to get somebody like that, a guy who's among the best at his position at some point in his career. And look, the Chiefs had, Patrick Mahomes in 17. They had Tyreek Hill in 16, along with Chris Jones, Marcus Peters in 15. So they had a run of those players. Travis Kelce in, I want to say 2014. Or maybe 2013. That was the year they had Eric Fisher at 1-1, and Travis Kelce came in at in the third round. So the Chiefs have had a run of excellent players, and for about 4 years, right? And then the last 3 or 4 years, I think they've had good, solid overall draft picks, and that explains the team's success since in the Andy Reid era. Basically, we're talking about 2 general managers, right? With John Dorsey and now Brett Veach. But overall, I think you can say the Chiefs have drafted pretty well in the Andy Reid era, and now we're looking at what I think is a pivotal draft for the Chiefs. Did not re-sign Tyrann Mathieu. And the trade of Tyreek Hill means 2 of the stalwarts of the Super Bowl Chiefs basically have moved on. And it's almost a little bit of a hit the reset button. It's not a rebuild. Brett Veach was clear to mention that last when we talked to him on Friday. It's not a rebuilding mode, but it's a replenishing. And that's why I think the Chiefs are going to use almost all 12 of their picks. Now, I'd like to get your thought on this. First of all, do you agree it's a pretty important and pivotal draft for the Chiefs? And you can say that every year, but just the fact that they've got to replace people like Tyreek Hill and Tyrann Mathieu and leaders on offense and defense. And do you trust Brett Veach to make this a good draft?
To your question, your 2-part question there. One, I think I do agree with you that this is a replenishment piece of it. You got to remember last year they went into that draft with the thought process of replenishing the offensive line. Brett Veach on Friday mentioned that cornerback and defensive line remained a priority for him. Remember, he said it was neck and neck on how he wanted to approach that. in the first couple of rounds of the draft. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them go that route like they did last year. Let's get the offensive line in place. They were able to get Orlando Brown in the trade a week before the draft. So now they were able to shift their focus to center and a guard. If they do any replenishing this year, they're going to start off, in my opinion, they should start off heavy on defense. You got to get that pass rusher because Frank Clark is in the last year of his contract. So you need to get another pass rusher there. You developed Mike Dan already. You spent a draft pick last year on a developmental player in Joshua Kando. So you got to see where he is. Cornerback is a huge position that needs replenishing because Charvarius Ward is now with the San Francisco 49ers. To your second question, do I trust Brett Veach to do this? Yes. I think if anything, he's shown over the last 2 or 3 drafts, he can identify the positions of need. And, he's not shy to go best player available, but he doesn't sacrifice not taking a player who fills a specific need. And they have needs. Most general managers will go into a draft with the thought process, what are our needs and what do we want? Sooner or later, that need has to take priority over want.
There you go. All right, we're about to take a break, but before we do, Herbie, I wanted to let's pause the draft conversation just for a moment. And you asked Brett Veach specifically last week about the injury status of a couple of players. I wanted to get that covered before I forgot about asking you about this. But we talked a little bit, or you talked a little bit about Lucas Niang and Jody Fortson. Just give us an update on those two guys, because we really haven't heard from anybody about that. And Lucas Niang especially is critical to what the Chiefs want to do. So before we head into a break, give us an update on Niang and Fortson.
Yeah, Veach revealed Friday that Lucas Niang, who suffered a torn patellar tendon in the season finale, might not be ready until the end of training camp. So this should set off some alarms there, because Niang started 9 games last season. He opened the year as the starter before injuries took a toll on him last year, and then Andrew Wiley ended up starting through the postseason. Wiley is back on a 1-year deal. So, realistically, Wiley can get you through OTAs, mini camp, and then, if Niang is ready, let them battle it out for who's going to start the regular season. But I think it's important for the Chiefs to identify a tackle in this draft, because if Niang is not the answer for the future, you got to have a guy there who you can develop. As far as Jody Fortson is concerned, he suffered a torn Achilles tendon. My guy, Jody Fortson.
Yeah, for sure.
Jody suffered that Achilles tendon in week 6, I believe, against Washington. But he didn't have an update on him. But, hey, I can say this. He's been active on social media showing him working out, and he's down in Texas right now working out with Patrick Mahomes. So that is an encouraging sign that he's well on the way for recovery from the Achilles.
Okay, so decent news on the injury front for the Chiefs. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into some names and what the Chiefs might do with those with their first round picks. We'll be right back.
Buying your first home is a huge milestone, but the journey there can be confusing. First Federal Bank of Kansas City is here to make it simple. After nearly a century of serving the KC community, our loan advisors have experience in every type of housing market. With a short phone call, we can give you a free rate quote and talk through loan options. No pressure, no obligation. The road to home ownership can be simple with First Federal Bank. Get started with a free quote at ffbkc.com/homes. First Federal Bank of Kansas City, because banking is personal. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. We're back on SportsBeat KC with Chiefs beat writer Herbie Teope, and we're talking about the NFL draft that comes along on Thursday. The Chiefs have 2 picks in the first round. Of course, the first round is the only round that gets selected on Thursday night. It's 2 and 3 on Friday, and then 4 through 7 on Saturday. The Chiefs are going to, at least they're scheduled to be active every day of the draft. And before we get into names, Herbie, of Chiefs draft possibilities, let's go back to something that Brett Veach, the Chiefs general manager, said on Friday, and that was the Chiefs have 16 to 18 players with a first-round grade. The Chiefs drafted 29, so at least on paper, they're not going to get one of those top 16 to 18 guys that they have given first-round grades to. However, if one of those players falls to 18, 19, or to 19, 20, 21, then you might possibly see a trade in that vein. So do you think that's the only way the Chiefs trade up with one of their first-round picks, is to get to, if one of those guys they gave a 16 to 18 first-round grade to falls to 19, 20, 21, do you think that's the only scenario in which you could see the Chiefs make a trade, or do we see the Brett Veach said, do they throw the haymaker and trade up to the top 10 to get the edge rusher they want, or a cornerback that they want? What is a more likely scenario?
Here's the beauty of what you just mentioned there. 16 to 18 players with a first round grade. And you have to remember how the Chiefs view a player is going to be different from how, let's say, the Carolina Panthers view a player, or even take a divisional rival, the Broncos view a player. So beauty is always forever in the eye of the beholder in the draft. That said, Brett Veach did say they were going to remain versatile, okay, because you have 12 picks, so you have to, she's not versatile, flexible. So you have 12 picks. You can be flexible. If you see a guy that you absolutely want and you think somebody else is going to get him, package those trades up and start exploring. Can we move up in front of this team? Case in point, 2017. And at that time, it's too bad McDowell's not here because he'd get a chuckle out of this. 2017, I'm in New Orleans covering the Saints. We knew the Saints because Sean Payton, we knew they wanted Patrick Mahomes. And if Patrick Mahomes makes it to them, I believe it was pick 11 or 12 at that time, if he makes it there, Mahomes is playing in the dome right now because Peyton would have pulled the trigger. The Chiefs knew the Saints wanted him because Peyton hardly ever went out to go work out a quarterback. He let his staff do that. When he went down to Texas to work out Mahomes, that sent the alarm bells off of all of us on the Saints beat. Holy smoke, he really likes him. What do the Chiefs do? Package it up and move right up in front of the Saints, and then the rest is history. So if Veach has an indication that a player that they really, really covet is not going to make it past the team, why not explore it? Let's see if we can get up there.
So the Chiefs had the number 27 pick that year and traded with the Buffalo Bills, who had the number 10, right? And Chiefs packaged their first-round pick and then following year's first-round pick and gave that up to move up to number 10 to get Patrick Mahomes, and kept him out of New Orleans. So the Chiefs and Brett Veach, I stand by this. I don't think we've ever asked Brett this, or he's never talked about it. But teams know what other teams are thinking. The Chiefs can't make a move like that without knowing that the Saints also are, hot on the trail for Patrick Mahomes. And I believe that there's sort of a wisdom out there that, all 32 teams are operating in their own little bubble and have no idea what anybody else is doing. That can't be true. The Chiefs have to have their own mock draft, right, on their board, right? They've got to know, they've got to have a pretty good idea what everybody else is thinking and might do, because in the first round, you only have 10 minutes to make your choice. It's only 10 minutes between picks, and you've got to, you're basing the future of your organization on a 10-minute decision that has to be made in 10 minutes. So they have to have a pretty good idea of what everybody else is doing and not be terribly surprised by what happens before them. And so I bring that up because think about it. You got to think about that when you're covering or paying attention to the first round of the draft. and wondering what it would take for the Chiefs to move from 29 or 30 up to whether it's 7 or 8 or or 17 or 19 or 20. They would have to, a player that they really covet would have to maybe fall a little bit or surprise them, or as you've mentioned a couple times, see a player who might have an injury issue right now, and with the Chiefs, if it's in a position that they don't have a need for immediately, could draft that person and sit through the sit basically a redshirt year for the injured person. They kind of did that with Lucas Niang, right? I'm not sure they were certain at the time that when they drafted Lucas Niang that he was going to be miss the year to rehab his injury, but that's what happened. And they got in year 2, they got a starter out of him. So Herbie, let's get into some names a little bit. Your latest mock at 29, you've got the Chiefs taking, I hope I pronounce his name right, Boye Mafe,
yes,
defensive lineman from Minnesota. And in number 30, the second pick in the first round, you got him taking Jamison Williams, the wide receiver from Alabama, who has one of those injuries, right? He's not whoever he goes to, he's not going to play immediately. And then we'll just continue in the second round, cornerback from Clemson, Andrew Booth, with their first second round pick. And then another name, I hope I'm pronouncing right, number 62 overall, Nick Petit Frere or something like that. I'm sorry. I did
from Ohio State.
Yeah, the offensive tackle from Ohio State. So you've got defensive lineman, with rush end capabilities, wide receiver, cornerback, offensive tackle. I think you're absolutely right that those are the 4 positions of need for the Chiefs in the draft. I'm not sure what order they're going to go in, but I think those are the 4 positions: DL, wide receiver, corner, and offensive tackle. And pretty much your 4 mock drafts have centered on those positions. I'm not sure you went outside of any of your 4 mock drafts in the first 2 rounds, because I've got them written down here: D-line, corner, wide receiver, those. I think in one of them, maybe your first mock draft, you had a safety going in the second round, but for the most part, wide receiver, cornerback, defensive lineman, and so what you've been saying through your mock drafts is, and you said it earlier, defense is likely the priority for the Chiefs in the first round. Will there be a good enough rush end for them to feel good about it, 29 or 30? Because this person, I think, has to come in and, if not start, be in the rotation. He's got to come in and be one of the 4, don't you think? Yeah,
the blue chips, like you mentioned earlier, the blue chip type player who has the capability to come in and start immediately, because that's what they need. I think it's pretty telling at the end of the year. Remember, after they lost to the Bengals in the AFC Championship game, Brett Veach on his end of season press conference said defensive line and cornerback are priorities. Well, free agent came and went. We didn't see any impact. Pass rusher joined the Chiefs. And then on Friday, Brett Veach once again emphasized those 2 positions are going to be one of their priorities. One of the, could be 2 priorities, but one of them is a priority early in the draft. So they need to get a pass rusher.
Well, that brings me to this point too, Herbie. They did not. You're right. They didn't go out and get a Frank Clark signing for a free agent signing and for big money at that position. But that doesn't close the door on that, right? Melvin Ingram is still out there. Jadeveon Clowney is still out there. If the person they don't find in the draft is available to them, I can see them making a run at Melvin Ingram or Clowney or one of those guys.
The problem I would have with that, though, Blair, and this, it's not going to be a long-term deal. It'll be a 1-year contract at the veteran minimum for these guys. And you're going to be revisiting the situation all over again in 2023. So if you're able to get your impact pass rusher now, and some of these guys are going to be available in the late first, early second, I think this is the time to pull the trigger because the Chiefs are going in a different direction by unloading, Tyreek Hill's massive contract, by electing not to bring back Tyrann Mathieu to another big contract. I think when Brett Veach says we're going to build through the draft, it makes financial sense because now you're just paying these guys on their rookie contracts. So, I think it makes sense to get the guy now and not bring in stopgap pieces when you've identified at the end of the year, we have to get better at pass rush, because bringing back Melvin Ingram at 31, 32, who's to say, I don't know how much juice he's going to have. Certainly he was an impact player last year. We saw that. But I think you need to go young here.
Okay. All right. So you would be surprised if the Chiefs used their first two picks. Let's just say they keep both the 29 and 30, and you'd be surprised if they went anywhere other than rush end, wide receiver, cornerback.
Yes, that's a fair assumption. Absolutely.
Right. So let's just cross off the list of the positions they absolutely don't need to address in the first two rounds. Quarterback obviously comes to mind. What about linebacker? I'm a little curious about that. Linebacker is somebody, I think they need some depth there.
They do need depth, but I think they have that already. You've got your two foundation pieces. The Chiefs spent second-round draft picks in consecutive years on Willie Gay and Nick Bolton.
Right.
With Anthony Hitchens no longer here, the natural progression for Nick Bolton is to go to the position that he played at Mizzou, which is the middle linebacker. So now all you need to find is a strong side linebacker because Willie Gay's your weak side guy. I think they have, they signed Elijah Lee. They spent free agency. And of course, I mentioned Elijah Lee because he's a K-Stater.
Yes, you did.
They signed a couple of linebackers in free agency. So you let him battle it out. And you have to have linebackers who are capable of contributing on special teams. I don't think you need to spend an early first, second round draft pick on a linebacker right now because you've got your playmakers in Willie Gay and Nick Bolton. Okay,
let me throw another position at you. And I didn't even think about this until I heard Brett Veach talk about the depth at this position, and that's running back. I thought it was really interesting. He said he wouldn't be surprised if a 1,000-yard rusher came out of either an undrafted free agent or the 6th or 7th round. So prospects, they have 12 draft picks. There aren't that many positions. I mean, in terms of position groups on a football team, I think they'll take a running back somewhere. How high could they take a running back?
Well, it's fascinating that he said that because if you remember my second mock draft, I actually had them taking a running back in the 4th round, Notre Dame star Kyron Williams. And then throughout some of these mock drafts I've done, I've had them taking a running back also in the 7th round because Brett Veach is absolutely correct. There are some studs in this draft, but because the premium isn't placed highly on 1,000-yard rushers in college in the professional level these days, some of these guys are going to slip, and he's absolutely correct. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they did pull the trigger on a running back. You got Ronald Jones, who they signed from Tampa as a free agent. He's on a 1-year deal. Derek Gore, exclusive rights free agent this year, so he'll be a restricted free agent next year. And then this is a make or break year for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Okay, he's entering his 3rd season. He's got to show them that he's worthy of that first-round draft pick because the Chiefs are going to have a decision to make in 2023. Do they use the 5th-year option on Clyde Edwards-Helaire? So, add some competition there.
Okay. All right, let's put you on the spot. You've had you do this for variety and give people something to think about when you go with different players for your mock drafts, right? You didn't have the same player at any of the positions, and no reason to. You want to give you want to create a range of possibilities for the Chiefs, right? So that's why Boye Mafe was your number 29 pick and Jamison Williams number 30 this week. And so you had different players at those spots in your previous mock drafts. All right, push comes to shove. Who will the Chiefs, if they don't trade out of that position, who do you think the Chiefs get at number 29?
Ooh.
And I've got somebody in mind myself, and I'll share it after you.
If the guy is there, and this is the whole thing, they're going to have to watch their draft board because if the player falls to them, I like that kid from Purdue. Yes. The very first mock draft, George, and I'm going to kill his last name, George Karlaftis. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Look at that. I like that kid. He's a nonstop motor when you watch him. And that's what popped out to me the first time I was doing the mock drafts. I was watching him and I was like, wow, this guy's nonstop. You know, he's got a little bit of TJ Watt. He's got a little bit of Max Crosby in him. It's just nonstop. And that's what they need. They need a pass rusher who's able to disrupt the edge and get to the quarterback. And I like him.
Okay, and then at number 30. So it could be 30 and 29 or 29 and 30, but who would you have the Chiefs taking next?
30, look, I like Kyler Gordon. I mean, if he's there.
Quarterback from Washington.
Yes, I like him. He's got the size. He's a perfect fit for Spagnuolo's scheme because he can do press man, he can play zone, and I think he's going to be there. You know, most mock drafts have him projected as late first round. Or excuse me, most national guys have him projected as a late first round, early second round draft pick. So I think he will be there. I like Kyler Gordon, and they need that.
You and I are in agreement on George Karlaftis. I like him a lot myself. I might go with the other first round pick that I'm not going to get his first name pronounced right, but Kaiir Elam, the cornerback from Florida. Yes. I do like him, and that to me is a little bit more of a position of need right now for the Chiefs. And it is a deep draft when it comes to wide receiver. And the Chiefs, look, they added Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They have begun, and with the McCole Hardman back, they absolutely need another wide receiver. But I think cornerback is just right now a little bit bigger need, and I think they address wide receiver a little bit later. So I got them going straight defense in the first round.
The fascinating thing is, if you remember back to Brett Veach, when he mentioned before he walked downstairs to talk to us, he met with Steve Spagnuolo and his defensive staff, you know, because they were making that pitch. These are the guys we want. And I think it's fascinating that, you know, they're in his ear. And so this is the reason why I think they go defense if they stay at 29 and 30.
Okay, this year's draft starts Thursday in Las Vegas. I think we all know where the 2023 draft will happen. Right in front of Union Station in Kansas City. And the Chiefs at this point would be front and center in the 2023 draft because in addition to their 7 picks, they added a couple from the Tyreek Hill trade. And I think there's an additional one from the polls. They got the supplemental 3rd round pick from the Bears for losing their front office personnel. So they could have as many as 10 picks in 2023. I believe that's right. So this is absolutely maybe when we look back on it, the time when the Chiefs sort of shifted their identity from Tyreek Hill and that offense to whatever happens from this point beyond that'll center around picks from the 22 and the 23 drafts. So going to be a great time, and we will come back at you on Friday afternoon, actually Friday at noon on SportsBeat Live. We're going to talk draft with Herbie Teope, Sam McDowell, and Vahe Gregorian. We will go over what the Chiefs did on Thursday and preview what will happen in the rest of the draft. So great conversation, Herbie, and we'll talk to you again later this week.
Thank you, Blair.
That'll do it for today. Randy Mason produced today's show and is part of the production staff and includes Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Tip of the cap to Chiefs beat writer Herbie Teope for sharing his insights. Today's morning sports edition ran 32 pages of baseball, hockey, draft coverage, the NBA playoffs, the weekend in auto racing, and much more. Go to kansascity.com and the subscription tab for more information. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC.